Serious, what was a normal part of your life growing up that other people were shocked by? Took me forever to realize that an older sibling taking the role of an emotionally absent parent is not normal. Grew up with 7 siblings. 5 brothers and 2 girls. Between the brothers we had just 4 pairs of shoes, which meant that at least 2 of us had to stay at home. Went to school barefoot for almost a week before they called child services. Man, I'm surprised the school didn't just send you home. Most schools are kinda trash like that. Child neglect. My house was filthy, and I mean really filthy. Black mold covering the 2 different corners of a finished basement. Trash all over the floors. Never clean clothes, because the washer and dryer were broken. Dinner once or twice a week with no food in the house. Whenever I'd go over a friend's house I'd notice, wow, it's so clean in here. Everything smells so nice. Look at all those snacks in the cupboard. That was my mother's house. Thank God she lost custody and I'm now with my outstanding dad. How old were you when your dad gained custody of you? Around 12 or 13. I resented him for it for a while, because abusive relationships are complicated, even parent-child. But I'm 21 now. I know just how horrible everything was, and I have a very healthy relationship with him. I've never had a family dinner at home. We just all get our food at different times, and eat in separate locations. As a teenager I would have loved this, since we weren't allowed to talk at family dinners, but I can see how this can be sad in adulthood. Weren't allowed to talk. Yeah, that sounds so weird. For me, family dinner was tell me about your daytime. Poverty. I grew up in a gross place. My single father was a drunk and left the apartment a mess. The couch was covered in rips with stuffing coming out. Stains all over the floors. Flies. Crap everywhere. My best friend of almost 30 years was telling me a while back that when he first came over he was amazed at how poor we were, as he thought he was the poorest kid in town. I explained that a lot of it had to do with my dad just leaving it in a bad state and being too drunk to clean, or to teach me or my brother to clean. But his mom did work and she kept their apartment clean. We had a good laugh on that. Luckily, my wife is clean, as were past girlfriends. These wonderful women taught me, along the way, how to maintain a clean home, to wash the shower once a week, to change sheets. I'm not a rich man, but I 100% feel live comfortably, in the literal sense. It's nice to come home to a clean one. I love that you refer to the ex-girlfriends and wife as "wonderful women." Just thought that was sweet and wholesome. I should have included patient as well. Kneeling on rice as a punishment for just about anything. Mom would throw a few handfuls of rice in a corner, and you had to kneel on it for 20 minutes to an hour. Hands behind your back, and don't you dare try to lean on that wall, or you'd get smacked in the back of the head, and into the wall, and your time would start over. Afterwards you'd have to clean it up, including any blood from broken skin, and then often you'd have to help make dinner, or do whatever chore as if nothing happened. Yeah, this was a common one for me, and my friends too. Having grown up in an area with a lot of Asian Americans, I remember reading The Secret Life of Bees in high school, and the main character was punished by kneeling on a pile of grits and relating so hard to it, and when sharing that with a class I was looked at really strangely by anyone who wasn't Asian. Did your teacher not intervene? Secret Life of Bees came out in 2001, well after mandatory reporting statutes were expanded to include them. Whenever my friends would come over, I would tell them about the rules you had to follow when talking to my dad. This would include, agree with everything he says. Don't speak unless asked a question. Always try and answer. Don't say I don't know. Don't cry when he has a go at you, etc. Took a few friends meeting my dad then refusing to come round again, being picked up early because they were upset. To realize that most kids don't live in constant fear of a parent, and don't have a set rules in order to keep said parent calm and happy. One time I made a new friend from middle school and invited him over. We just had a normal evening of pizza and video games and watching shitty early internet flash movies. My parents would check up on us, but just let us be, and watched TV in the living room by themselves quietly. As the evening went on, he got kinda weird and withdrawn, and then took me aside to ask if me and my family were a bunch of fucking Bible thumpers, to which I incredulously replied no to. He basically explained that the lack of skin flicks lying around, loud arguments, strange people coming over, and holes punched in the walls was extremely off-putting to him. That sort of constant instability and chaos was completely normal and something that regular average people did. And my quiet boring home life was a total outlier. It was kinda hard for us to be friends after that, and we drifted apart really fast. I hope he's doing alright. That's really sad for that kid. I hope he discovered a new normal. Never being able to tell your parents the truth about where you are going. I remember the first time I realized it was weird when at a friend's house. We were leaving and all she said was we'll be back later, and her mom said have fun. I was shook. No interrogation and her mom seemed to trust her. It was wild. I never once heard/saw my parents fight or yell. I can only recall one time that they were even sort of huffy with each other. Lucky you. You know how uncomfortable it is when parents argue/yell each other in front of you. Or when your parents scream at each other about you in front of you. This is fairly mild. My dad extensively renovated our house. He made every bench top, door frame, window, shelf, desk, sink, shower, cupboard or drawer at a comfortable height for us. Our ceilings were 9 feet. My family is well over 6 feet, with my dad topping out at 6 feet 6. When people first came to my house they were shocked by the height of everything. We had little stools in the bathroom for short guests. We even had to get step stools in the children's room because a normal height friends had issues getting on the couch when my siblings and I were younger. My house was the stuff of legend on the yard. We even had a giant dog which to us was normal sized. I have never been as comfortable in a house as I was in my childhood home. That's awesome and hilarious at the same time. Honestly, I just needed a break from all the abuse stories in this thread. Not knowing who my father was, I went to a Catholic school, so it was pretty weird to not have a nuclear family when I was younger. It's not so much of a big deal nowadays, but it still makes people pause when I tell them I've never met my dad. As an Asian kid I grew up being disciplined physically, got the belt, the hand, the slipper, wooden spoon, you name it. This had happened to me so much as a kid I literally thought this was normal and that all families did this. I remember being in 8th grade and having a conversation with my friends and we were talking about our parents and I nonchalantly was like, oh yeah, my mom hits me all the time. She always slaps me in the face. I'm used to it because I genuinely and truly thought this was normal. I didn't realize how fucked up it was until my teacher brought me into the hallway to ask if my home life was okay and explained to me his duty to report thing. He asked if I wanted him to call. Obviously I said no. But I remember going forward this teacher used to walk on eggshells when it came to giving me bad comments or speaking with my parents during parent-teacher interviews because he didn't want me to get in trouble. While your parents seem excessive in their discipline, I have to give this teacher props for looking out for you. My parents showed love, support, and financial stability. Came as a fucking shock to my wife. That is pretty stunning. Good for you having such parents. I grew up in this rickety old farmhouse in the middle of Minnesota. It was really cold a lot of the year, and our upstairs didn't have insulation. So we didn't have any heat upstairs. We'd sleep with an electric blanket and loads of other blankets heaped on top. When I woke up in the mornings, there would sometimes be frost on my walls because it was so cold and the windows didn't keep the cold out very well. It would also sometimes get to minus 50 degrees Fahrenheit, and then school would automatically be cancelled because kids couldn't wait outside at the bus stop. And sometimes mom would take us outside to blow bubbles on really cold days. The bubbles would freeze in midair and fall to the ground and shatter. My friend/boyfriend were all shocked by this stuff. Doesn't get anywhere near as cold where we live now. I remember one winter my dad got laid off earlier than normal for the winter, and things got pretty rough. We had a furnace, but not enough for oil. We put a wood burner in the attached garage and lived in there the whole winter, eating hot dogs for dinner 5 to 6 times a week. I don't eat many hot dogs anymore. My family once had to survive off of Hamburger Helper for a whole summer. I've never voluntarily eaten it since. My alcoholic father addressing me as parasite from the age of 10. A hopeless power play from an insecure man. I'm sorry for all the times he has called you that. The amount of trips to the liquor store when I was young. Nearly every time I got in the car with my mom or dad, the story was the same. We are going to stop at the liquor store then home. Sometimes when I'd switch parents, they are divorced, I'd stop at the liquor store twice, once each way. One day I was at a sleepover at a friend's house whose parents weren't extreme alcoholics. We ran errands on 3 or 4 separate times, and didn't stop at the liquor store. 8-year-old me was so confused. On the final trip I poked my head up between the front seats, and trying to be helpful and remind them said, "Aren't we going to stop at the liquor store?" And the parents looked at me like I had 2 heads. No. I was so confused I just got out of the van and went inside. I feel this one. My family made daily trips to the liquor store and the convenience store for cigarettes. A car hotboxed with cigarette smoke was my normal. You know that's probably even worse. The second-hand smoke could damage you, while mine didn't hurt me. Sorry friend. That my personal pet was a bear. Up in Alaska I hand-fed a black bear sandwiches as I got off the bus. Eventually he got bold and started coming to our porch. I fed him some salmon and he never left. That was until a female black bear came onto our property and he left with her. Apparently black bear cubs will get kicked out of the nest. So we basically took him in. He was malnourished, and then he went off to start a family. I grew up ultra-orthodox Jewish, so a lot of stuff. No TV, no internet, no video games, speaking Yiddish at home, laying motionless on the Sabbath, pretty much forbidden to do anything, etc. I had a similar situation. We did have TV and internet, but just all the holidays, kosher laws, weekends being all about Shabbat, wearing kippas, and so on being a normal part of life, until I went to college. Holy shit, what a culture shock it was, especially the fact that you can get stuff done on the weekends. Traveling. My parents were divorced, and my dad would fly my sister and I to wherever he was working once roughly every 2 years. Sure, it was cool to travel and go to Dubai, Egypt and Vietnam before I was 15, but I only got to see my dad for 2 weeks every 2 years. I just wanted to see my dad, man. Dads are important. Reading this thread makes me feel better about doing things like watching TV all day with the boys instead of playing cars or something more active. I do everything I can, and my anxiety still gets to me. How are you and dad now? I wasn't allowed outside of my bedroom. No radio, TV, friends or phone. I had an evil stepmother who hated me since I was 5. They finally kicked me out when I was 15. I still don't have good social skills, and I'm afraid to upset people. My parents never took my siblings and I to the doctor or dentist unless bone was showing or you were on death's door. I always assumed it was because we couldn't afford it, but it wasn't until I was much older and in therapy I realized it was actually because my parents were controlling. Both of them worked in the medical field, but they weren't doctors, so they thought they knew better than everyone else. If we did get sick, I had chronic sinus infections as a child because I had terrible allergies, none of which they addressed. My dad would call his colleague's wife, who was a doctor, explain my symptoms, and she would prescribe antibiotics. My dad also forged my annual immunization forms for high school 1 year because he didn't want to take me. The dentist he used to take us to was his friend and would give him a discount, but I'd have to endure this man's sexist bullshit if I wanted my teeth cleaned. The last time I ever went to him, he told me as he's giving me a filling I should really get a nose job, I'd be so much prettier. My dad scolded me in the car after, thinking I had brought it up. It wasn't until I went to the doctor engine for the first time in college. I had no fucking valuable piece of my medical history other than accidents I had as a kid. It was like I was starting new at age 20. I now go regularly to the doctor. In a similar vein, my mother refuses to take me unless I desperately need the Once, in school, I was sent directly to the hospital on orders from the school. The doctor told me I had a chest cold, throat cold, head cold, the flu, strep throat, and pinky. My mom looked him dead in the eye and said, "Can you just write the note saying he's okay to go back to school tomorrow?" Spoiler, I stayed at home a week recovering. Holy shit, how are you not dead? Somewhat related, my parents dated for 12 days before getting engaged. 2 months after that they were married. Their 20th is in December. Whenever I tell people this, their mind kinda stops working for a minute. My parents' first date was 4th of July and they were married October 12th. They'll be married 45 years next month. My stepmother beating the absolute shit out of me for very little reason, or sometimes no reason at all, on a pretty regular basis. Are you okay? I'm now, yeah. My dad divorced her when I was like 14. The total lack of love. My brother and sister have always had a good relationship with my parents, but for reasons I don't understand my parents wished I didn't exist. I was an inconvenience at best. I once broke my ribs falling out of a tree. They made me wait 3 days until they had spare time to take me to hospital. Beatings were frequent. Beatings for any perceived mistake. Beatings for being bullied at school. The beatings I was told were to toughen me up. Beatings for crying while being beaten. I eventually figured out that the beatings, name calling and abuse all came from the same root cause. Using up my parents' time and effort when they could have been spending it with my siblings or each other. So I tried to become invisible. I learned to move around the house silently, which floorboards squeaked, how to open and close doors without sound, how to control my breathing to be absolutely quiet. I set up a chair and books in my closet so I could be in there unseen for hours. It was only when I left home that I found out other children enjoyed spending time with their parents, that they talked to them, had fun with them, and were supported and cared for by them. I can't imagine how good that must feel. Even to have memories of cuddling on a sofa with a parent, or going to the park must be amazing. Sorry you had to live in such a shitty place. I've never had my own room. I grew up in one-roomed apartment with mum, dad, elder brother, a dog and a cat. We never had much space there, but a lot of furniture that was really necessary. People didn't understand why I never invite friends to my home. That jealousy when somebody complains about parents entering their room without knocking. OHH, it's good to know I'm not the only one. I didn't know I was in a very religious family until I found out how abnormal it was in college. Like my family and I never missed Sunday Mass. We used to celebrate every first Friday of the month by dressing up nicely to go to a Latin Mass, which was like the original language said in the first Catholic Masses. We prayed the rosary a lot, and during the Lenten season we would go around churches to offer more rosaries and prayers. Plus our family has like 4 priests and 5 nuns. Now that I'm older though, a lot of the stuff we used to do happens less often, although I still haven't missed Sunday Mass. My dude, I'm here with you on that one. Dad's a Latin Mass kind of guy, but mum's just regular, so we went to the local Catholic school. I didn't understand why none of the other 7 year were able to rattle off all the prayers in English and Latin. Oh, and let's not forget trying to prove to the teachers that I really am allowed to take communion, even though I'm not in grade 4. Living at a farm of 90 horses and casually bringing it up. What do you do with that many horses? I never took a vacation or seasonal trip with family as a kid. We just never had the money for it. When I tell people this, they're appalled that I've never been to Disneyland, beautiful islands or foreign countries in my youthful summers. Guess a lot of people I know can't fathom the idea that some families are poor. That and I've moved around a lot. Went to like 4 or 5 elementary schools and 3 middle schools. Just trying to find the next cheapest place to live. Same. My family never went/go on vacations, and although I would be jealous of all these trips that classmates went on, I understood that we couldn't afford to. It still surprises me that others can't get their head wrapped around it though. I low-key grew up in a cult. It wasn't ridiculously intense, no terrible brainwashing or abuse, but the seclusion made for a bizarre childhood. I went to an elementary school in the basement of our church. At the largest, there were 15 students. The smallest I remember it being was 5. We were there for the week in school, then back again on the Sabbath, Saturday for service. I didn't have any friends outside of the church, and inside the church it was only my classmates that were even close. It made for a real shit 8th grade when my school shut down, and I was moved to public school. For the last year of middle school, the church had a lot of weird rules about things. They believed that the Sabbath started late on Friday and went until midnight Saturday, and therefore we couldn't go to school or work on Friday. I thought Friday was part of the weekend until I was 9. They followed a flexitarian diet, fish and poultry as the only animals we could eat. Anything with a cloven hoof or crawled along the ocean floor was dirty and forbidden. To this day I haven't eaten any red meat. I never really developed a taste for it, and it's fun to pull out. Never ever have I ever eaten bacon at parties. No dancing, no singing, no fun. I didn't have any knowledge of pop culture or even music that wasn't choir or piano. You wouldn't really know it to meet me now. I'm fairly well adjusted, decently functional human considering the isolated mess I started as, which is nice. That sounds kinda like how I grew up. We were holiness. My grandfather was a holiness preacher. We didn't have a TV until I was 10. Couldn't wear anything but ankle-length skirts or dresses. Couldn't wear jewelry or cut our hair. I remember thinking that I'd never see 10 years old BC Jesus was coming back. Then 16 and so on. I still catch myself thinking I'll never see my next birthday, and I'm now in my 30s. I didn't know there was any music other than Southern gospel till about 11. Sex and feminine hygiene was a huge taboo. Never ever discuss it, otherwise it was a spanking and a prayer meeting. I wasn't allowed to go to sex ed classes in 5th grade BC, it was a sin. Oh, and I wasn't allowed to shave my legs, because that would lead me to become a Jezebel. I could go on and on. But I feel you, dude. If this is too personal, please just ignore my question. Since you weren't allowed to discuss female hygiene, did you know what periods were before you got them? Did you have access to pads? Not at all. I thought I was dying. I had my first one at a church friend's house, in her pool of all places. I legit thought I was going to die. Tampons were forbidden as they would turn me into a slut. I don't mind talking about it, because if my story can help at least one person, it was all worth it. I was 18, before I was able to leave the situation. If you or someone you know is in a similar upbringing, there is a whole other world waiting for you. You are not evil, and it is not a sin to ask questions.